Good afternoon. It's not over. I think we'll just start. Good afternoon. My name is Georgiana Oliarek, and I'm very honored to serve as the chair of the prize committee. It is also my great honor and privilege to be able to stand here and announce the 2012 Awards for Excellence. Just to have a very brief understanding of how the prize works, we have two categories, two areas in which we recognize excellence. One is publications and the other one is exhibitions. In the publications category, there are 3 awards. In the exhibition category, there are 5. But because this is by curators, for curators, all curators all the time, there are always exceptions, innovative exceptions. And I also think after this morning's keynote address, maybe we should add a category for a curator who most abandoned caution. I think we can all agree on that. Oh, now I'm hoping this is going to work. So we're going to start with the publication awards. And this is where the first exception comes. The jury decided to split the exhibition catalog category into 2 and award 2 prizes. The award for outstanding monographic exhibition catalog goes to Extravagant Inventions, the Pricely Furniture of the Rotkins by Wolfram Cope. And Wolfram, if you're here, please come and accept your award. Are you here? Oh. And for outstanding thematic exhibition catalog, it goes to Inventing Abstractions, 1910 to 1925, How a Radical Idea Changed Modern Art by Leah Dickerman, with contributions by Matthew Afron, Masha Chlenova, and Jody Helpman. Leah, are you here? In addition, the jury also wanted to acknowledge one more exhibition with an honorable mention, and that is Richard Artschweiger by Jennifer Gross, with contributions by Kathleen Chaffee. Jennifer, are you here? Okay. In the category of Outstanding Catalog Based on a Permanent Collection, the prize goes to the Audubon Aviary Original Watercolors for the Birds of America, Roberta Olson. There is also an honorary mention for Outstanding Catalog Based on a Permanent Collection. It's Decorative Arts and Design, the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts Collection, Volume 2 by Diane Charbonneau, and I think Stéphane is here to accept the award. Yay, Canada. Next is the award for Outstanding Catalog Essay, and it goes to The Last Days of Pompeii by John Seidel. The jury also wanted to acknowledge, in the same category, honorable mention, A Big Good Enterprise, Van Gogh and His Markets by Simon Kelly. And that concludes the publication awards. On to the exhibition awards. As I mentioned, there are typically 5 when we restructured the exhibition awards. However, this year in the permanent reinstallation exhibition category, there were quite a few entries, so we decided to hold off those exhibition nominations until next year. So, for the exhibition awards for Outstanding Monographic or Retrospective Exhibition, Federico Barocci, Renaissance Master by Judith Mann. There are two names. And Babette Bone. For Outstanding Thematic Exhibition, Inventing Abstraction 1910 to 1925, organized by Leah Dickerman with curatorial assistance by Masha Chlenova. For Outstanding Exhibition in a University Museum, Sol LeWitt, The Well-Tempered Grid by Charles Haxthausen. And for Outstanding Small Exhibition, African Art New York in the Avant-Garde by A.L. Bureau. As this is my last year as Pride Committee Chair, I wanted to take this opportunity and thank everyone. It really is a lot of hard work, and it involves quite a number of curators from across the membership, and I'd like to thank them each for their great contribution and commitment, and always a sense of humor. Also, I wanted to remind you of two things. If you've won an award, please stay behind because we'd like to take a group photo. And the second is that the Prize Committee meets at 2:30 in the lobby, and I welcome everyone who has an interest in this committee to come and join us. One day I just sat beside Emily Neff, and here I am. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm sure your stomachs are beginning to rumble, so I'll be quick. But we are going to go from here into a president's address and then into our Pechachkas, which I finally learned how to pronounce this year. And then we'll be having lunch in the wonderful galleries, which were just honored, the Aviary Galleries. So before Carol gets up here to do her final address as AAMC president, I thought I would take this opportunity to say a few words about her. Most of you know Carol, I hope. I can make this estimation because there is no person who works harder for this organization than Carol, since its very beginning. If there was a most dedicated member award, she would win it every year. As a founding member, Carol has chaired several committees and served on various task forces. She's been an AAMC trustee since 2005, successfully completing 6 years as a board member, including a 2-year stint as our vice president for communications before assuming the presidency 2 years ago. Since becoming president, Carol has overseen the creation of the ADAA Curatorial Fellowship Awards and launched a long-term mentoring project for curators. The program in its pilot year has already proven to be rewarding for the participants and promises to become an important professional development offering for the organization. As with every AAMC president, leading the organization while working full-time as a curator demands a high degree of functionality. In the past 2 years, Carol completed work on her show David Smith, Cubes and Anarchy, and embarked on retrospectives for both John Altoon and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. Her catalogs are brilliant, her eye is sharp, and her work is thoughtful with an acute attention to detail, always. Carol is also a dedicated mother of 2. She has been my personal mommy mentor since I told her I was pregnant this exact day last year. Now, I know the last thing a small organization wants to hear from their executive director is I'm pregnant, especially when you've just assumed the presidency. Carol's face was a mix of genuine concern and terror when I first broke the news to her. But her support and attention to every AAMC item, no matter how small, and ability to keep on top of everything amid a chaotic 2 years is downright amazing. I should also say props go to the wonderful Madeline Haddon during this period of time, for whom I'm very grateful as well. I will finish up now with perhaps my favorite tidbit about Carol. In addition to being a champion for all curators, she is also a basketball player. Now, I am 5'3", and I couldn't imagine a more intimidating sport. And did I mention she began playing basketball in her 40s? During a phone call last week, Carol clued me into the concept of elasticity in one's life as a way to be able to achieve everything you want without sacrificing anything. I suppose if Carol were a superhero, she would be Dr. Elastic. It is for these qualities and so many more that the AAMC board voted yesterday to recognize her as a lifetime emerita trustee of the organization. Please join me in congratulating Carol on this high honor and for 2 years of superior leadership.
Thank you, everybody. Sally said pretty much everything I was going to say so about what has happened over the last couple of years. But I will just say it has been an incredible privilege and an honor to serve as the AAMC's president, and I want to thank you all for that opportunity. I've learned in the job about the concerns, the frustrations, and also happily the hopes of curators from across the country and increasingly Canada and hopefully Mexico. And even better, I've gotten to know many more of you personally along the way than I did at the beginning, and so that for me has been an incredible treat. I am constantly awed by the talents, the brilliance, the accomplishments of all of you. We hear a little bit every year at this annual meeting from people, but you are an incredible group of professionals and individuals. And I hope that what the AAMC has accomplished, not only during my tenure, but in its history and ongoing, will continue to serve you and our profession well. As Sally mentioned, this past year we inaugurated the Art Dealers Association Foundation, the ADAA Foundation Curatorial Awards, specially created to provide R&D money, which is often the most difficult money for us to find, for exhibitions organized by AAMC members, one in the pre-World War II field and one in the post-war field. And actually, I think both Natalie Malt and Lexi Sullivan are here, the recipients of those 2 inaugural awards. So if the 2 of you could stand just to be acknowledged, that would be nice. We also, as Sally mentioned, initiated our 12-month mentorship program with 8 mentor-mentee pairs of AAMC members from across the continent, and special participation from Jennifer Russell, the Associate Director for Exhibitions at the Metropolitan Museum. And again, if the mentors and mentees present could stand, that would be great. I know there are at least a few of you here. We hope and plan to enrich this ongoing mentorship program in the upcoming year, and hope that many of you will want to participate in one capacity or the other in the future. And then in terms of our ongoing activities, last summer the AAMC sponsored a webinar for our members addressing handheld technology for museums, and we continue to provide our very active and useful online discussion board for members. In addition, we offered another successful session at CAA this year addressing the curatorial career perspectives on the profession. We had a healthy year in terms of fundraising, although we can always do more. Not so subtle hint to all of you to make a tax-deductible contribution to the AAMC. And of course, we had our annual opportunity just now to honor colleagues with awards for excellence for exhibitions and publications. So I am confident that our new president will be taking over a healthy and a vibrant organization. And now there are many people to thank for the health and vibrancy of the organization and for their participation in this year's annual meeting. We are grateful to the Luce and Crest Foundations for providing ongoingly funding for curatorial travel to our meeting today. And again, I would like to ask all the travel grant recipients who are here to stand. And we have a number of sponsors for the conference, and I would like to thank all of them: the ADAA, Bonham's Auctioneers and Appraisers, Freeman's Auctioneers and Appraisers, the Samuel H. Crest Foundation, the Henry Luce Foundation, Tyler Rollins Fine Art, Skinner Auctioneers and Appraisers, Sotheby's, and the David Werner Gallery. So truly, without our sponsors, we could not make this meeting happen. So we are grateful. And of course, we are supremely grateful to our conference hosts, the New York Historical Society, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Museum of Arts and Design. The program itself for the conference was crafted under the expert guidance of committee co-chairs Sylvia Yount and Julian Cox, along with the entire conference committee and Sally Block. So thank you to all of you for making this happen for us. And I also want to acknowledge the members, all of the members of the AAMC's Board of Trustees, and all of our committee chairs, co-chairs, and committee members, and the generous support of our leadership circle. So, and last, but certainly not least, I want to thank the awesome AAMC staff. I think that we must have the smallest staff to membership ratio of any organization in the country, and they are amazing. Maddie Haddon, whom I hope many of you have gotten to know over this past year, started at the AAMC last summer as our programs associate, fresh from receiving her bachelor's at Yale. And despite her recent entry into the full-time working world, Maddie has not only performed her own tasks phenomenally, but she also stepped up to the plate and really kept things going, not just ably, but efficiently and gracefully during Sally's maternity leave. So will be eternally grateful to Maddie for that. She's also just a wonderful person. And of course, so let's, yes. Why don't you stand? And of course, Sally Block, new mom and executive director extraordinaire. She's now back in the saddle, and I cannot imagine a better colleague, a better friend. Welcome back, and thank you for all of your incredible work for the AAMC on our collective behalf. So. And now, William Rudolph will introduce part one of our curatorial Pecha.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Carol, for saying that word for me so I don't have to say it. It sounds like an episode of Arrested Development when I try to say it. I'm William Rudolph from the Milwaukee Art Museum, and with my colleague Linda Hardigan from the Peabody Essex Museum, who will speak to you after lunch, it's our privilege to present the session, which we like to call the Curatorial Slam. As just a reminder of the format, this is where you have a limited number of slides, a limited amount of time per slides, so they are short presentations that get points across very admirably. I'm going to read the names of our presenters. Their biographies are listed in your material. This would be Rebecca Lawton from the Eamon Carter Museum of American Art, Catherine Wysocki Gunch from the Baltimore Museum of Art, and Mary Murray from the Munson Williams Proctor Art Institute. Those are our pre-lunch sessions. Linda will introduce the post-lunch sessions. So please join me in welcoming these very brave individuals. And you know, someday we will have to do this in every exhibition meeting and acquisition pitch, so it's good training.
First, let me say, if any of you are waiting to learn if I've acquired a drawl since moving to Texas, I'm going to disappoint you because you can't drawl and do one of these things. So am I queued up? Okay. My project begins here with a haunting work in the Curators collection. Focus on the painting for the remaining seconds, and you might quickly surmise the challenge. Can we fashion an abstruse topic, mysticism, into a worthwhile experience for the museum goer? Can we navigate the slippery terrain, pun intended, of decoding what is by nature a recondite subject for a general audience? Oh, why not scrutinize the inscrutable? Better to understand how mysticism fueled Hartley's imagination. Might we gain entry into an artist not given to self-disclosure? These are 20 seconds? Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Hartley is pegged on the soil and spirit man within Stieglitz's universe, but the cosmos he orbited was an outer ring. What separated him from the others? Certainly his time in Europe, but now, here you have Hartley in circa 1910, well-versed in Emerson, but by the time he dies, he had tackled everything ever written by George Santayana, Cardinal Newman, Plotinus, St. Augustine, works by Rolle, Unamuno, mystics, the impenetrable tomes. Okay, so the storyboard here. Hartley is baptized in the Episcopal Church. He becomes a choir boy. He sees the consecration of wine and bread, an act of transubstantiation, in that the wine and bread, while truly remaining such, become at the same time the true substances of the body and blood of Christ. He briefly considers becoming a priest. Looking at these gentlemen, you could surprise why not. He becomes an artist instead. So, Farmer's Retreat, where, 1907 he erects tents. Green Acres might have filled the void had he stayed, but after 1912, it morphed into America's first Baha'i school. See Mark Tobey. Hartley advanced. He enters the room at 291. He encounters the holy man, Stieglitz. He's launched as an artist. His first show includes the square-footed landscape, a real landscape transformed into a visionary one. Credit to Edward Grieg's music, composed by Ibsen, surrounded by the supernatural play. He encounters Ryder. He initiates a series of so-called dark landscapes and a tribute portrait and a later essay. The small, highly eroticized landscape, its dense surface, owes something to Ryder's encrusted canvases. But what is evident is Ryder's fusion of Christian imagery with mysticism, deeply resonated with Hartley. Then, cosmic cubism, cobbled together from reading Bergson and Die Blaurauter and On the Spiritual of Art in German, which once he read in English, he thought for an untutored public. He felt himself aligned with Burke. Of great importance, of course, is William James' The Varieties of Religious Experience. In essence, for James, mysticism is simply a vivid sense of reality, of the unseen. An analog, I think, can be posited to a painting such as Raptus. Writing to Stieglitz, Hartley admits, I only know that with all this new work, it's the result of new inward experiences, the result of having come in touch with the great mystics of the universe. Oh, Hartley's interactions with Duchamp during Dada's second phase in New York. Hartley got Duchamp's sense of irony and understood with Duchamp's jarring use of materials, the game had changed. Duchamp's large glass is not without corollaries to sensations and mystical ecstasy, and we can certainly see Cézanne inflected in landscape number 3. Now, Hartley realizes that something had to be done by this imagination business, which I think is a code word for mysticism. Trying realism on Versailles, he moves to Aix-en-Provence to conquer Cézanne's mountain, but what he finds there isn't exactly realism, but a kinship between Cézanne and Bohème. Dogtown, the hills behind Gloucester Harbor, Garden of Natural History. He reads Willa Cather and the mystic Bohème, whose concept of the law of signatures states that every object in the real world has a hidden meaning. And this contract helps Hartley, appeals to him. The haunting series of paintings Hartley creates in Mexico, courtesy of the Guggenheim Foundation. They are a rich mine to excavate for how Hartley synthesized landscape, architecture, culture, mysticism, and occult literature. These paintings, I think, can be linked to mystical abstractions, or the early ones, and then serve as later prototypes for his late paintings, specifically the Mount Katahdin. Hartley finds inspiration in German Alpine films. He sees one, 4 successive evenings in a row. This, he says, is the contact with mystical nature. It was so intense with all that snow and ice, so touchable near. Such mystical landscape has never before appeared in art form. His beloved Mason family of Nova Scotia, Hartley's true family, and the reappearance of the figure in his work. He meets them, he targets them, he stalks them, and then he transforms them into icons of religious faith. These memory paintings and the accidental drawing of the 2 Mason boards, he places them in a Last Supper with these words referencing the Old Testament. Okay, so then what do we do with a painting like this, which has been cataloged as Hartley's diatribe against commerce and wealth? It's an intriguing image, to be sure, the predominantly blue palette signaling spirituality, if not Matisse. But look, this burly guy is shown kneeling, but not really in prayer. Maine's Mount Katahdin, one of the highest peaks on the East Coast. Hartley, at 62, he climbs its arduous flanks with a guide. He spends 8 days camping, and his memory reports of Katahdin, he has internalized this mystical experience with the mountain and perfectly expresses it back to us, transforming into 3 dimension. So my last slide. Katahdin inspired Hartley to write a poem that brought him full circle back to his landscapes of 1909. With apologies to Mr. Hartley, I'll read his last stanza. The moment of a man clawing at a cliff is nothing to a cliff. It is the man that bursts with enmity towards something bigger than himself. The whisper of a mountain floors him, suspending his ankles to a laughing wind. Thank you.
Wow, can you follow that? That was something. Ready? Good afternoon, and thank you for your attention. In Baltimore, we are working to reinstall our African art collection in a bigger and better space than the museum. My education colleagues want to see a map in the galleries. I do not. Yet after consultation, I found that nearly everyone wants to see a map. This presentation outlines for you the great map debate and our proposed solution. African art is still fairly unfamiliar to most museum visitors, particularly because basic knowledge of Africa is unfamiliar. When you search Flickr for the tag Africa, you get a series of photos that reflect prejudices people have about the continent, exotic animals and landscapes, and photos of adorable children in need. When you Google Africa, you end up with the ubiquitous elephants, but also a series of maps. It's my contention that maps can present a narrow view of a diverse continent larger than the US, China, India, Japan, and most of Europe combined. A map of Israel and Palestine would illustrate just how politically active and yet deceptively neutral a map can be. As an egregious example, Sebastian Münster's 13th century map of Africa allowed Europeans to feel that they knew something of Africans. The elephant is on this map, of course, as are drawings of the kinds of people one might meet on the continent. The following text explicates the preposterous bodies of the other illustrated, put on Münster's map. They're great, right? Knowing the general outlines of the continent and the cities on it is not the same as knowing about the people who live there or their art. But then again, people really love maps. In most other parts of the art museum, geography and time are not divided. This plaque at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., informs the visitor of the period and location of a given tradition. In African art, few museums have the depth of collections to support a chronological display, subdivided by geography, and so many present their collections on a loose geographic model. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, always a vanguard of museum practice, uses this approach. You can see their tasteful map in this picture, which I must admit I've never noticed on any previous visit because I'm always so taken by the Nkisi figure facing the entry. But in Baltimore, we will not arrange the collection by geography. So is the map right for us? Last year, the museum began a project to map the names of cultures represented by the collection. As we've seen, a map seems to allow people to know something about Africa. But the names of ethnic groups, political systems, and languages are placed side by side from all periods of history, jumbled together without an indication of migration or of shifting borders. History greatly complicates mapping. This powerful 2003 installation by Yinka Shonibare, Scramble for Africa, criticizes the 1885 meeting in Berlin, where European powers formed colonial territories using borders like rivers and lakes that ignore the location of kingdoms and polities that are actually relevant to the artworks in our gallery. The similarity of modern and historical names can also confuse visitors. This excellent commemorative bronze head was commissioned for a king of Benin, who once ruled a vast territory from Benin City in present-day Nigeria, but not in the neighboring country of Benin. The Benin kings happened to commission art locally, but this brings up another question. Are we mapping patrons or artists' locations? We tend to map the site of patronage, but how does this translate to contemporary art? Ellen Otsui, a Ghanaian artist who has lived and worked in Nsukka, Nigeria since 1975, has primarily his patrons in Europe and the US. Where on the map does Mr. Anatsui's art belong? A common argument for maps in African art galleries centers around the idea of education. A map must be provided to help organizing learning about unfamiliar places and cultural traditions. I don't object to this idea, but I greatly object to its unspoken corollary, that visitors are very familiar with Euro-American geography, history, and cultural practice. We cannot assume all visitors to the gallery would recognize Napoleon, for example, or be able to explain his European campaigns. Even practicing Catholics may be hard-pressed to identify a monstrance, as the former ubiquity of daily exposition of the sacrament declines, replaced by weekly or maybe only monthly opportunities. Beyond such specialized equipment, even the basic outlines of the Christian narrative are unfamiliar to many otherwise educated young people. I recently received a formal analysis paper on this Mantegna Holy Family on the flight to Egypt that used excellent vocabulary and precocious visual analysis skills to describe Mary, Jesus, and, quote, that guy, unquote. And the historical geography of Europe is certainly even more unknown. When we speak of Flanders, I believe that this friendly yellow face is the first thing many people think of. Placing a map in the African galleries and nowhere else in the museum reinforces the idea that Africa is somehow more distant and inscrutable than other areas of the world. But okay, people love maps. Since the era when it could be assumed that all visitors had a basic grasp of European history from the Greeks to the present, and a general knowledge of Judeo-Christian belief systems is over, if it ever even existed, we ought to acknowledge that the pierced body of Durer's Saint Sebastian is likely as perplexing to most visitors as is our wonderful Congo Nkisi figure. But I am only responsible for the African gallery. So I began thinking about how we could use this expected map, this beloved map, to teach more than simple geography, and to avoid the misinformation that can result from relating historical collections to a map of African nations in 2013. So our solution will be to show a number of maps changing at an absolutely glacial pace on a digital projection screen. We'll begin with a few shifts in the Egyptian dynastic era to track with our collections in that period, and we'll also present Ptolemaic Egypt to point out the long relationship between African kingdoms and European polities. We're developing a map to show the expansion and decline of the Jenne culture in Mali, Nakan Ibo Ukwo in Nigeria, and the formation in the Kuba Kingdom of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The list goes on. We'll also depict Africa during the colonial era and hope that the many maps included in the digital presentation will make it clear that this colonialism was a major moment in recent African history, but really hardly defines it. The map will also show the emergence of independent nations, and we'll finish with the map as it stands in spring 2015. The map will not be interactive, as it is only a footnote in the gallery, and it would break my heart to see people staring at the map. But I hope its complexity will ensure that the map does not answer visitors' questions so much as spark their further curiosity. Thank you very much for listening. I hope we'll see all of you in Baltimore in 2015.
Thank you. Perhaps you work at an art museum like mine. We're on a treadmill of creating new, better, shinier, brighter experiences for our visitors, which has its merits and generates excitement, but leaves less time for curatorial R&D. Enter AAMC's SLAM and a welcome deadline to which I can apply myself to develop the idea about birds and flight in contemporary art. Is this going to work? Is it on auto? No, this one isn't. Oh, okay. So is the green button the button? Green button's the laser. Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. Okay. I'll speed up. In 2006, I organized an exhibition about, To characterize this project as a work in progress would be overstating the progress portion, but thanks to this conference, I've actually spent some time reading and thinking about it. In 2006, I organized an exhibition about photography as a tool in contemporary sculpture and was enchanted, and that's not too strong a description, by this installation titled Colony by Jane Eden. Eden created Colony while at Sculpture Space, an artist's residency program in Utica. The title is in part inspired by the original ancient Utica, a Phoenician colony in North Africa, as well as the colony of far-flung artists who flocked to Utica, New York, to work in the creative lab that is Sculpture Space. The film captures birds alighting and flighting from wires near the train station, an apt metaphor for transience. Eden's work made me much more sensitive to the appearance of birds and bird flight in contemporary art. Artists are drawn to this subject matter because it abounds with potential meaning, embedded as it is in our collective mythologies, including the Judeo-Christian tradition. From the book of Genesis, we have the story of Noah's Ark, and the dove as harbinger of hopefulness. And in the Christian Testament, a dove descends to earth as a symbol of the Holy Spirit. In American literature, this promise is poignantly expressed in Emily Dickinson's poem, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. So I discovered that for myself, the spiritual potential of avian imagery is attractive. Two artists who are also erstwhile Catholic girls, Peter Coyne and Kiki Smith, tap into religious mythologies to different effect. Coyne admires the beautiful rituals and basic humanity of the church, if not the church itself, and her recent exhibition at Mass MoCA was called Everything That Rises Must Converge, the story by that great Catholic writer Flannery O'Connor. Like O'Connor, Coyne presents a dark imagination described as revealing tension between beauty and decadence and ultimately life and death, Victorian in its overloaded refinement. Kiki Smith's artwork is populated by fairy tale figures, witches and animals or familiars. Storytelling is at the heart of her work. That's an impulse derived from her childhood catechism of spirituality, death, resurrection, and the lives of the saints. She has said, quote, Catholicism is probably one of the most icon and idol-worshiping religions because it believes in the physical manifestation of the spiritual world, end quote. Smith believes that working as an artist is a demonstration of belief in the unknown, exploring she knows not what, but convinced she must go there anyway, which makes the trope of religious faith a useful model. Artists, of course, use birds for other ends as well. Ronnie Horn is a conceptual artist examining perception, and her project has been described as the mystery of identity. In her series Bird, created between 1998 and 2007, Horn created photographic diptychs of taxidermy birds seen from the back. The act of comparing encourages the viewer to look very closely and to appreciate nuance and difference. Walton Ford's large watercolors dazzle as technical tour de force, but then they sneak up on the unaware because of their disturbing violence and general creepiness. Ford admits he's no minimalist, that he likes overwrought emotions and melodrama, so like Smith, his imagery is narrative. It's also unabashedly derived from 19th century naturalist artists, particularly Audubon, whom Ford describes as villainous as much as heroic. He was just too trigger-happy, quote, even for that time. He was more like a National Rifle Association guy than an Audubon Society guy, end quote. Ford's paintings seem to reproduce the 19th century's desire to possess and consume through classification, but Ford shifts this premise by revealing the dark underbelly of actual consumption and destruction that the imperialist reach of colonization has wrought on the world's flora and fauna. Jewelry artist Chris Eyrick studies, among other things, birds, their flight patterns, and the history of personal adornment. Her interests have manifested in a variety of avian-related objects, including several kinds of brooches. She's fascinated by murmuration, for instance, the collective flocking and flying patterns of starlings. She created a brooch with 3 images frozen 1 second apart and spliced together to create the pattern from front and from each side. This further inspired Chris to imagine a starling murmuration video projected onto a scrim in the museum's sculpture court, and I'm always looking for interesting projects for this remarkable space. Chris's interest in birds stems from her environmentalist and naturalist sensibilities. Like Walton Ford, she understands her place within an artistic continuum that has wreaked in its history a swath of destruction, in her case, within the history of personal adornment, the destruction of entire species for the collection of feathers for hats and other accessories. Here's one of Chris's works in progress, found bird wings that she hopes to fashion into neckwear, just as I aspire to fashion these ideas into an exhibition. Thank you.
And with that, we are to be dismissed to the aviary galleries, which I can't imagine a more fitting end before lunch. We will be dining in both the library and the galleries, which is on the second floor, and we'll reconvene down here at 3 o'clock. And just a reminder that the prize winners who would like to be photographed in a group photograph, please meet here, and that committee meetings for the conference, prize, and governance committee begin at 2:30 on the circular benches in front. Thank you.